Imagine you're locked in a cell with no windows, no phone, and no way out. Just you, the walls, and your thoughts. That's what happened to 24 young guys back in 1971 at Stanford University. They were part of an experiment that would change our understanding of human nature forever. You see, these guys weren't just any guys. They were ordinary college students with no prior record of aggression or violence. But they were about to become prisoners and guards in a mock prison setting created by psychologist Philip Zimbardo. He wanted to explore how people behave when given authority and power. I mean, have you ever been in a situation where someone's in charge and you feel like you just have to do what they say? Yeah, it's not so different from these guys. Zimbardo's experiment was inspired by the work of another famous psychologist named Stanley Milgram. You might know his name because of a similar study he did back in 1961 where he asked people to administer electric shocks to strangers. Can you imagine being asked to do that? It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? Anyway, Zimbardo took a different approach. He created this mock prison setup and randomly assigned the students into two groups, prisoners and guards. The plan was for them to stay there for 2 weeks, but things didn't go as planned. For 6 days in August 1971, the Stanford Prison Experiment turned into a real-life nightmare. The guards started acting like actual guards, while the prisoners became more and more desperate. And it wasn't just that they were mean to each other, some of them even developed sadistic tendencies. I mean, these guys were supposed to be good students, but within days, they were torturing each other. One of the most disturbing aspects was how quickly the guards started abusing their power. They'd order prisoners around, humiliate them, and inflict physical pain on them. And the prisoners? They became submissive and docile, just like you'd expect in a real prison. It was like they lost all sense of individuality and self-respect. But here's the thing, Zimbardo himself played a role in this experiment. He was the warden, remember that term? Yeah, he was the one in charge of overseeing everything, making sure the students were safe, or so he thought. And you know what? He got caught up in it too. At first, he just observed, but eventually, even he found himself getting involved, making rules and regulations that made things worse. This raises some serious questions about how we behave when put in certain situations. It's like we're all just pawns in a game, following whatever rules are set for us without questioning them. We become so focused on doing what others expect of us that we forget our own values and morals. And that brings me to Ivan Chip Frederick. You might remember the name from Abu Ghraib prison back in 2004. He was one of those American soldiers who got accused of torturing Iraqi prisoners, which led to a big scandal. But what people didn't know at first was that his behavior wasn't just about him being cruel, it was also about how he'd been conditioned by the environment around him. The same Stanford psychologist, Philip Zimbardo, showed up in court as a witness for Frederick's defense. He explained that, given the right set of circumstances, anyone could end up doing something like that, beating prisoners, defiling their belongings, and so on. And here's where things get even more interesting. Zimbardo had actually done something similar himself back in 1971 during the Stanford Prison Experiment. Now, imagine you're in a situation where your commanding officer tells you to do something questionable. Would you still do it? Would you speak up or go along with what they say? That's what we're getting at here. It's not always about being good or bad, sometimes it's just about following orders, no matter how wrong they might seem. You know, this whole experiment has implications that reach far beyond a simple study on human behavior. It speaks to our very nature as individuals and the conditions under which we operate. So, what do you think? Would you want to be part of an experiment like this? Or would you rather just stick with your daily life, hoping that such situations never arise? As Zimbardo himself said, the line between good and evil is not always clear-cut. That's the truth in all this. We're not just victims or perpetrators, we can be both at different times, depending on what happens around us. And so, here's the thing, we need to think critically about our roles and responsibilities every time we find ourselves in situations where others are giving orders. Do I have a duty to question those orders? Am I willing to stand up for what I believe is right even if it means going against the person in charge? You see, that's where the true power lies, within us as individuals to choose how we respond to any given situation. It's not just about being moral, it's about taking control of our own lives and making conscious choices about who we want to be. And finally, let me ask you, do you really think this is just a story about an experiment? Or is it something much deeper, a reflection of ourselves as human beings?